God, I do this so frequently. To me, the pronunciation, if we were pronouncing your name back in Lebanon or in Israel, would it be Gad Saad?
Well, the first part is right. The second is it's a guttural ayin, so it would be Saad. But
Saad.
since most people can't make that noise, you would then do Saad. But usually you don't even do that. You just go
Just
sad.
sad. Okay. Because
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I always call you Gad Saad, and I know that that's contrary to received wisdom in America. You're a brilliant author. I've got to tell you, I just finished your Parasitic Mind, the book, and it is a work of genius. And I know you have another book coming up. Well, you also have The Sad Truth of Happiness.
That's right. And those are, and there are a whole bunch before that, but sure, we could talk about all of them.
I couldn't read all of them in time.
Save all the glorious compliments for when we're on the show so that it is in the official record.
Oh, I already started. They'll edit this.
Oh, we started. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just clicked record. What? You've got another book coming up that I am looking forward to so much. I'm going to pre-order it. Suicidal Empathy. This is a thing I think it'll be another New York Times bestseller. And I think it's apropos because J.D. Vance just gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference. The last person from America who did that was Kamala Harris. His was not well received. What did you think about it?
Right. So I actually, in preparation of coming on today's show, I made sure to listen to the entire, I think it was 19 minutes.
Yes.
I'd only seen snippets of it on X. Look, I think it was perfect. He talked about, the silliness of hate speech and misinformation and disinformation. These are all consequentialist statements. And let me maybe explain what that means in a professorial manner. So in ethics, there are two ways that you can navigate through ethical systems. There's what's called deontological ethics, which is an absolute statement. So for example, if I say it is never okay to lie, I would be engaging in a deontological statement. If I say it's okay to lie to spare someone's feelings, then that would be a consequentialist statement. Now, for many things in life, it makes perfect sense for us to be consequentialists in our bent. So, for example, I often joke that if you want to have a long-lasting marriage, and if you hear the following question, do I look fat in those jeans? Then you better put on your consequentialist hat and say, of course you don't. You've never looked more beautiful.
That's
you may
right.
be slightly stretching the truth, but it makes sense because you love your spouse. You don't want to hurt her feelings. On the other hand, when it comes to things like freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, scientific pursuits, journalistic integrity, those have to be deontological by definition. And so what J.D. Vance was doing there is, without using my terminology, saying, look, there is no such thing. What is one person's misinformation is another person's truth. So I certainly appreciated him for that. And of course, I appreciated the fact that he talked about the rampant open border immigration, which he is exactly correct, that threat is bigger than all of the other foreign threats combined.
Immigration, whether it's legal or illegal, done in a corrupt way, and in a mass legal immigration can be just as deleterious as illegal immigration. When I saw that speech, I was just profoundly struck that, yeah, we're back, but we're back in a way that I don't know how long it's been since we ever were here, where a president standing there is not going to beat around the bush. He was very direct, and he said, essentially, we're here to speak about the security of Europe, but we know what we're establishing security from the external forces, that would compromise our security. But what are we protecting? What is our defense? What are we defending in Europe anymore, or the
Right.
West?
I mean, we should be defending the unique values that have made the West this anomalous outlier in the history of human societies, right? And I often remind people that it takes folks like me who have sampled from the buffet of non-Western societies to remind Westerners that what you have is not the default value throughout history, right? It's a small bleep where through a miracle of insight from a few very brilliant people, you were able to create. I mean, I say you, but of course I am part of the West today, but I'm speaking now as someone who hails from the non-Western world. You created a world where individual dignity, individual responsibility, freedom of inquiry, freedom of speech, all of the good things that have made the West the bastion of freedom, those are the things that we're trying to protect. Now, if you allow entry to people, and your point was a good one where you said whether it be legal or illegal. I mean, illegal is even worse, but even legal immigration that is not done in a strategically intelligent manner, that doesn't recognize that not all people share your values with equal alacrity, is going to lead to problems. Now, it doesn't lead to problems as long as the number of folk who don't share those fundamental values is below a certain percentage. When they are between 0 to 2%, oh, they're just a cute, peaceful minority with
Hmm.
cute headscarves. When they're 3 to 5%, well, now they're a bit more politically insistent and politically organized. When there's 6 to 10%, now we start setting up no-go zones where people who don't share our draconian value systems from the 7th century are not welcome. Don't walk your dog in this neighborhood. We don't like dogs. And then once you get past a certain number, then the pancreatic cancer is irrevocable. It's irredeemable. It can't be fixed.
I call it, as a matter of fact, I always have these little scraps of paper around here. The principle of no going back. There is something that is unique about the policy of immigration. And there's a few things. One, I think that we should be discussing, and that's really where I want to go with you on this. I think we should be having a very, very open discussion. It's going to be very uncomfortable because in our polite society today, if you want to call it that, with suicidal empathy and the parasitic mind virus, uh, just everywhere in the world or in the United States, it's going to be tough. But you can't go back in America from naturalization. Once you naturalize somebody at this point of our laws, in our lawmaking, you cannot denaturalize somebody. And so if you mass import particular cultures that are contrary, incompatible, or it doesn't even have to be quite as far as the Sharia mindset of Islam, you can't say, well, you know what, that was a mistake. And there's a lot of mistakes that America's made in the last 75, 100 years that we can go back from. But this is one you can never go back from. So what do you think about that?
Well, listen, laws can be rewritten. I do think that there will come a day, maybe, where people will lose the reflex to be infinitely polite. I mean, as we often hear, you shouldn't in mixed company discuss politics and religion because it's viewed as gauche to criticize someone's religion. But if that religion calls for my complete and utter eradication, is it gauche for me to criticize it? If I've lived that experience where I had to put on really good running shoes and outrun those who wanted to decapitate me, is it gauche for me to criticize them? But again, the reflex of the West, which, if you want, we can drill down what suicidal empathy is all
Yeah,
about.
please do.
Right. So suicidal empathy is basically the idea that, look, empathy is a perfectly appropriate evolutionary emotion to have because we are a social species. And as social species, we need to engage in meaningful interactions. One of the ways by which you and I can engage in meaningful interaction is we each have what's called theory of mind. In other words, I could put myself in your mind to get a sense of what it is that you need of me and so on. By the way, autistic children don't have theory of mind. That's one of the
Oh.
ways. That's one of the ways that you're able to diagnose a young child as being autistic. There are certain tasks that you could give children where they either pass that test or not. If they don't, then that is a telltale sign that they're autistic. So being empathetic is part of the fabric of being a social species. But like Aristotle explained to us several thousand years ago, everything in moderation, right? Everything at the right time and the right amount to the right person, right? So what you have with suicidal empathy is a dysregulation of the otherwise appropriate emotion called empathy. Let me now explain specifically what
Please
that means.
do.
So take, for example, OCD. Let me draw an analogy. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a psychiatric disorder that can be very debilitating. But at its root, it is based on something that is actually quite adaptive and evolutionarily relevant, which is the scanning for environmental threats. It makes perfect evolutionary sense for me if I see that you just sneezed into your hand, then you put out your hand to shake mine, that if I shake your hand just to be polite, then I will quietly go to the bathroom and wash my hands because I don't want to catch your flu. I go back and check in the back door of our garden to make sure that the door is locked because we want to be safe when we go to bed at night. So checking for environmental threats makes perfect evolutionary sense. What doesn't make sense is when once you have tended to the potential threat, you then are stuck in an infinite loop, right? So the person who suffers from germ contamination OCD, they're stuck in an infinite loop in front of scalding hot water for 8 hours, washing their hands. They can't get to work because they can't extricate themselves from this infinite loop. Their skin is falling off because it's scalding hot water. So you take an adaptive mechanism, but then once it misfires, it becomes maladaptive. And so that's the framework I use to explain what happens with dysregulated or misguided or suicidal empathy. The original reflex is evolutionarily relevant, but once it's dysregulated, it makes no sense. Now, how is it dysregulated? It's dysregulated, in several ways, but one of the key ways is that the target of your empathy is always the wrong target. So MS-13 gang members, we owe them greater empathy than our American vets that are homeless in the streets, right? That can't make sense, right? We haven't evolved the emotional calculus to care about random strangers more than we care about our own children. It doesn't make me callous if I'm more likely to jump in front of a moving truck in order to save my biological child than if I am to save a random child. If I can't, I'll try to save all children. But my brain and yours have evolved the emotional system that meets its investment in ways that make evolutionary sense. So it doesn't make sense that we care about criminals a lot more than we care about victims. It doesn't make sense that we care more about giving money for transgender opera, wherever it is in Guatemala or Costa Rica, than it does to taking care of our own homeless problem. So suicidal empathy is a complete orgiastic misfiring of an otherwise noble emotion.
What do we do about it? This is
right.
This is where we're always at this point. How do we stop this insanity? Everything's inverted. It's just like after October 7th, the inversion of morality, the inversion of causality, the inversion of everything became ever more glaringly obvious.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would love to say to you that, Trump's win now solves the problem. It hardly does that. It certainly is a good, wonderful first step. In order to finish a marathon, I have to complete 26 miles, and it's always good to put one foot in front of the other until I reached it. So that first step that we took by making sure that Kamala Harris didn't win is a wonderful first step. But the parasitic ideas and the suicidal empathy that have led us to this abyss of infinite lunacy took 50 to 100 years to originally be spawned and then proliferate out of the university campus. So I don't want to, sell you a pack of lies by telling you, it's going to be an easy battle to reverse it. But we will reverse it by, look, there was a time when saying the N word, no one would bat an eye because it was normalized that in certain ecosystems in the United States, that's what you called Black people, and people didn't care. But then through a gradual cultural process, that became a no-no. And then people internalized that code as something that a good person would not address someone else using the N-word. And so it's a similar process to get rid of suicidal empathy and to get rid of, the parasitic ideas that I discussed in the Parasitic Mind. Now, I'd like to think that it won't take as long as it took to develop those ideas. It took between 50 to 100 years, depending on the parasitic idea. For example, postmodernism is about 50 years old.
How about Marxism? I mean, that's definitely a parasitic mind virus.
So that's why I date them
50 to 100
years, because it depends on which parasitic idea we're talking about. So I'd like to think that we can accelerate the inoculation against all this nonsense, but it's going to take effort because, look, Donald Trump has 4 years to reverse something, but then another degenerate can come along and then reverse everything back. So it has to be at the cultural level where people who have functioning brains don't find it necessary to write to me saying, "Dear Professor Saad, I know that you are an evolutionary behavioral scientist, so I'm wondering if you can lend your expertise. Can men menstruate?" Well, the fact that a adult felt so lacking in confidence to believe what the average 3-day-old squirrel would know, that no, it's women who menstruate, not men, and that he has to write to me to get my professorial imprimatur, that's what we have to get rid of, right? And that's why I call them parasitic ideas, because they zombify you, whereby up is down, freedom is slavery, women are men, penises are vaginas, and so on. So it's going to be a long battle, but I'm optimistic that we will win.
I agree with you fully that it is a long battle. We have to roll up our sleeves now. Trump can't do it alone. Even the Trump team can't do it alone. There'll always be those that have the virus that want to also even come in and, I don't know, gaslight somebody within the administration or nefariously, subversively change course like he had on steroids in his first administration. I don't think we have the same threat this time. But no, this is not easy. I mean, I woke up the next day after the election, walking this far off the ground, just happiness. Like
I'm Canadian and I was walking around. I was levitating.
People in Germany and the UK, all over the world are happy because I bet you in Saudi Arabia they're happy because in the Middle East, I think that the strong men and those governments do still see that the stabilizing influence of a sane America is better than the obverse to that. So yeah, we have to do, and I think it's going to take courage, though, don't you? Like people speaking out and really being willing. I see a lot of things that I know are not politically correct, particularly about immigration, Islam, Sharia, Palestinianism, as I call it, etc. So, but you got to be out there and just say it anyway.
Yeah. So in chapter 8 of the Parasitic Mind, I offer a set of prescriptions that, hopefully people can follow. One of which, to your point about, invoking courage, is I implore people to activate their inner honey badger. And the reason why I use the honey badger metaphor is because the honey badger, the African honey badger, has been ranked by several, groups of animal behaviors as the fiercest and most ferocious animal alive. And that's saying a lot because there are a lot of fierce and ferocious, right? Now, it's the size of a small to medium-sized dog, and yet it could hold at bay 6 adult lions. How does it do that? Because it walks as though it's T-Rex. It walks as though it's 60 feet tall, because it is so ferocious. Now, when I implore people to activate their inner honey badger, I'm not imploring them to get physically violent. But what I'm saying is that if you have a set of principles that you think that you can defend in an articulate manner, then you have to be a honey badger. Don't walk away from a quote confrontation because maybe the person might not, might unfriend you on Facebook, or might not invite you to the cool kids party, or maybe you're worried that you won't get a good grade in your paper, or you're worried because you don't have tenure. There is always some quote valid reason why people think that it shouldn't be them who speak. But if you remember in the Parasitic Mind, I gave the following example. The young men on D-Day who landed on the beaches of Normandy, most of them knew that they would be mowed down like insignificant little mosquitoes by the machine guns of the Germans, who were just going to be picking them out as if they're insignificant flies. And yet they all said, yeah, I'll go, I'll sign up. So they didn't have the guarantee of fighting the war and coming out unscathed. Now, when I say that, oftentimes people say, oh, yeah, but aren't you being cavalier? You're protected by tenure. Boy, do you not understand the threats that I face when I speak out the way that I do. I may be protected by tenure, but I've had to take a leave from my current university and go to a university in Michigan because of the amount of threats that I was receiving. So it belittles the courage that some of us exhibit when you say, yeah, but you can afford to take the risk. No, because I have to walk around with my head on a swivel, worried about who's going to come at me. So there's always a reason why it shouldn't be you, but it is better to live 5 minutes as an honorable person than 500 years as a coward. So yes, you can modulate how much risks you take. You can decide that you don't want to be a reckless martyr, right? Nobody's asking you to just jump off the cliff and commit harakiri. But what we're saying is, don't be quiet, right? Don't say, don't worry, Gad Saad will handle it for us. He's a big boy with big shoulders. He'll fight the fight for us. In whichever capacity that you can, simply speak out. And if we all did that in unison, that problem, the current problem, would have been solved 30 years ago. Now, some of the people are starting to wake up, but while I appreciate, I want to keep a welcoming tent to all people who come in, better late than never. It doesn't take much courage to now be a professor to come out against DIE, diversity, inclusion, equity, when Trump has just signed an executive order banning it. You're a coward punk. You're doing it now and you're getting the attaboy. Try doing it for the past 25 years when no one else was doing it. That's what courage is. So better late than never, but I think too many people are cowards. And that's why I do what I do, which is to try to motivate people to speak out.
Well, I know you're not a Christian or a practicing Jew, but in the scriptures, courage is a command. Be strong and of a good courage, God said to Joshua as he was going into the promised land. And, Jesus said, to essentially take joy when you are persecuted, that we should take joy in it because great is your reward. And you will be persecuted if you stand for truth. And what we have to do is be able to talk about these issues and talk about the toughest ones. And I think, J.D. Vance says, no voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. And he said a lot of other things that were, well, at the end of the speech, I don't think you saw this. At the end of the conference, the man whose title I do not know, German, got up to the
started crying?
Started crying.
Oh, I saw that.
This was just horrifying. But then I posted about it. I said, this is what comes when, that adage, truth hurts, because I think that there was, inside of them, I think many of them realized he was speaking truth. And it is a humiliation to, on a national or an international stage, to be called out for your cowardice and your foolishness. You know, um, I have another thing that I like to look at, and I call it the test of maximalist extrapolation. And what I do, I don't even know if this is a real thing. I just kind of made it up in my mind because I think about these things like immigration, and I wonder if you take something like an idea, should women be in fire departments, essentially on the front lines, if you can call it that, when almost no women could pick up a 250-pound man or even drag him out of a burning building. And then I say, okay, well, maybe somebody says, well, look at this huge, 6'3" tall woman, and she's just carried 500 pounds of weights or whatever. But then maximalize it, take it to the maximum, extrapolate it out far, and say, all right, well, what if we had all fire persons women? Would that be okay? And test the theory that way. And this is what I think about and I think almost everybody, even the parasitic mind virus victims, might actually agree I'd rather live. So when it comes to immigration, I think about the United States and Europe. I weep over Europe and think, okay, in 50 years, if America was 50% American Christians, Jews, people who maybe have no faith or whatever, and then 50% Muslim, would it be America anymore? What do you think about that kind of a test?
Yeah. So what did you call it? Maximalist?
I called it the maximalist, which maybe this is stupid, maximalist extrapolation.
Yeah.
Test.
So I've actually, what I would call exactly what you're doing, and you're exactly on the right. Your instinct is right. Is what I call testing the boundary conditions, and testing the boundary conditions precisely by extrapolating from where we are today to forecast where we'll end up if we extend this to its boundary condition. By the way, that's exactly the mechanism that I use cognitively that allows me to generate what turns out to almost always be, if not always, my prophetic satire, right? So I use satire and sarcasm as one of many tools of persuasion. And so when I satirize something, I've done exactly what you were describing, which, as I said, I call, extrapolating to the boundary condition.
The boundaries.
Right? So I take an insanity and I say, let's push it to its maximal boundary. And then I satirize that place. And then I cross my arms and I wait for reality to catch up. And so then people write to me and say, how the hell did you do that? That was prophetic. Well, no, because if you understand the cognitive process, or call it the slippery slope argument, right? If you start here, if you say that it's okay that we remove biological markers from our passports because 1 out of 10,000 people may be non-binary and may be offended by that. Okay, well, if I am under the grip of suicidal empathy, then I'm going to say, yes, we need to protect the gentle feelings of the 1 out of 10,000. But then, of course, the downside of that is that we are a sexually reproducing species made up of two phenotypes called male and female. I shouldn't have to lose my biological marker that defines who I am. I am a man, not a cis man. I am a man because it might. And so I can easily take the lunacy of that particular passport story and then extrapolate it and predict that one day we will have biological males competing against women. By the way, if you go and watch my 2017 testimony in front of the Canadian Senate, just watch my opening testimony. Every single thing that's happened, as in this case, as relating to the transgender craze, I predicted, right? Again, not because I'm an oracle, not because I'm a prophet, because I understand the the cognitive process by which disastrous ideas travel. And so that's exactly what you're
I
doing
think you
also.
just said there that you understand how it travels, because what you're saying is my little test here. If you begin this way, if that is the mindset or the virus or the ethic that is being implemented, it will eventually grow. It can't stay as small and contained. And so
It-
there is a process that you just mentioned, and it's inevitable that unless it's halted or severed in some way, reversed, you're going to end up at a place that is maximalized. It's going to continue until it's stopped. And
Absolutely. And by the way, that's why I use, so maybe it's apropos now to kind of explain why I use the neuroparasitological framework. So in the animal kingdom, uh, the study
sure.
of parasites is a very, very interesting field of study. It's called parasitology. But parasites can end up in various organs of the host's body. So for example, a tapeworm parasitizes your intestinal tract. A neuroparasite, and that's the field of neuroparasitology, is when a parasite look to end up in the host's brain, altering its neuronal circuitry and hence behavior to suit its selfish interest, usually its reproductive interest. So, for example, a wood cricket, an actual cricket, wood cricket, abhors water. It wants nothing to do with water. But when it is parasitized by a neuroparasite called a hairworm, the hairworm needs the wood cricket to jump into water in order for it to complete its reproductive cycle. So the wood cricket, once it is parasitized, merrily jumps and commits suicide because it has now been zombified. So that's when I had my epiphany. I said, aha, I will now use this neuroparasitological framework to argue that human beings can not only be parasitized by actual physical brainworms, but they could be parasitized by ideological brainworms, which I called idea pathogens or parasitic ideas. And
Mm.
so, and it is that causes you to then, I mean, I've had interactions with physicians, OBGYNs, anesthesiologists who were chastising me for saying that only only women bear children. As a matter of fact, I've got screenshots of a anesthesiologist of color who was basically arguing, first of all, that, she was a woman of color, so I can't contradict her. Well, guess what? I'm a Jew of color who went through the Lebanese Civil War, so my victimology outranks yours,
That's
so step
right.
aside. Okay, number one. Number two, she was arguing that she's a woman, therefore a man can't be mansplaining what the menstrual cycle is. Number three, I said, but I've published papers in top scientific journals on the effects of the menstrual cycle on women's behaviors. And then she still said, yeah, but you don't know enough, because you need a physician to be able to understand that only women can menstruate. Because until 15 minutes ago, the 117 billion people that had existed on Earth were perfectly capable of navigating through the conundrum of identifying what's male or female. They all seem to be able to assort in the right way between male and female in order to have 117 billion people to have existed on Earth. But 15 minutes ago, this anesthesiologist of color decided that she's walking off the abyss of infinite lunacy. She's the wood cricket who jumps into the water. She's explaining to me with this ostracizing wagging of the finger that no, we now know that men too can menstruate. That's what parasitic thinking is.
And this parasitic thinking has I don't know if I hate to say the words that sound so doomy, like England is lost. I don't know how England recovers. I want England to recover. I want all of Europe to recover. I happen to like Europe. I mean, um, to walk down the Champs-Elysees or to go to the Loch Ness and look for Nellie or whatever. I mean, Europe's a great place, or was. And I want it to be saved, but I don't know if it can be saved because the virus has reached maybe a point of no return. And I want to prevent America from going there. Gad, I have to guess that 40 years ago, you wouldn't have looked at England and thought that they would have allowed the immigration to utterly destroy their country, their culture, their future.
40, no, you're right, because the patterns had not yet been written on the wall. But 20, yes. 25 years ago, yes. So I'll give you an example. I mean, we can certainly talk about England, but I'll give you an example from my home city of Montreal. We moved from Lebanon after the first year of the Civil War in end of 1975. So from 1975 to 1998, so that's 23 years. I mean, I was in the U.S. for several of those years because I was getting my graduate studies in the U.S. and I was a visiting professor in the U.S. and so on. But for much of those 23 years, let's say 16, 17 years at least, I lived in Montreal. In those years, from 1975 to 1998, I saw one time a veiled woman, once. And the reason why I remember it is because it had shocked me when I saw her. It was around 1998. From 1998 till today, I could walk down on many streets in Montreal where it's roughly 50% veiled.
What?
Oh yeah. And in some areas, it's 100% veiled. Now, it didn't take 500 years. It didn't take 5,000 years. It took from 1998 to 2025, right? In other words, the presence of Islam in Montreal has been astoundingly present over the past. I mean, in ways that it's difficult to know whether you're in Raqqa, Syria, or whether you're in Montreal. I mean, you could walk in certain areas downtown where you are certainly in the minority, very much like how you now see in Bradford and in Luton and in London and in Malmo and in Paris and in Marseille and so on. So the reality is that, look, I don't need to preface this, but I will, just because of all the potential imbeciles who might be listening.
We have to do the disclaimer now, right?
Exactly.
Let's do the disclaimer.
Get ready for the disclaimer. Let's hug it out with the disclaimer. I know more Muslim people than most people will ever meet in their life. I've had a million Muslim friends by virtue of the fact that Arabic is my mother tongue. I come from Lebanon. I've known tons of Muslims. I play soccer with them and so on and so forth. Individuals come in all varieties, in any faith and in no faith. Some are perfectly lovely. Some are degenerate, criminals, including Jews, of course.
Right, anybody.
There is no monopoly over the darkness of the human heart. And so there is nothing dispositionally evil about Jews or about Muslims or about Christians. But when we're talking about an ideology, in this case, cloaked in the robes of a religion, we could with a lot of reason and with a lot of dispassion, ask the question, does the infiltration of that ideology in a society bring about greater love toward the Jews, greater love towards gays, greater love towards personal liberties, greater protection of little girls' clitorises? And we know the answer to that. It can't be, there's no equivocation. It's either yes or it's no, right? Is there ever a time when Islam became the dominant religion somewhere where it led to an increase in personal liberties and freedom? And the answer is unequivocally no, right? So when we are making statements about what type of immigrants we want, we could be talking about immigrants who bring us economic benefits or scientific benefits. But also, we have to talk about the likelihood of immigrants sharing and defending our foundational values. Now, some idiot now from your show will write to me and say, but my cousin Ahmed Hussein is a colonel in the U.S. military. That is as valuable as arguing that when I say men are taller than women, you respond, but my Aunt Linda is taller than my Uncle Roscoe. Therefore, this proves that it's not true that men are taller than women, right? It's that level of stupidity that most people engage in these dialogue, right? Islam can do only one of three things. It can either improve the personal liberties and freedoms in a society, keep them unchanged, or reduce them. There's no other possibility. Now, do we have enough data from 1400 years of history that allows us to answer this question unequivocally? I posit yes. And therefore, your immigration policy has to take that into account. That doesn't mean that we don't let in anybody from those societies, but it does mean that if you open the floodgates, once they are enough of them in your society, it is a death nail. So take, for example, Dearborn, Michigan. What's happened in Dearborn? Dearborn is a small microcosm of what happens to a society once it becomes fully Islamized. If you now try to go to Dearborn and proselytize the word of Jesus, you might face trouble. But that's not happening in Yemen. It's happening in the United States. But it's happening in the United States in an enclave where Muslims dominate. What's happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota with the noble Somali, all of whom are neurosurgeons and classicists, right? What's happening there? Probably you don't want to walk around with a big Star of David in those neighborhoods. So to use the extending to the boundary condition, today we have Dearborn and we have Minneapolis. Tomorrow, inshallah, let's add another 10 enclaves. And then the next day, inshallah, Allahu Akbar, let's add another 30. And then you wake up and you've lost your society.
And you've lost it. And what I say about when I brought up there's no going back principle, what I meant about that is once you have reached a certain, once you have naturalized an individual, if they're now U.S. citizens, you can't say that was a mistake, even if they become terrorists, which I think that should be changed, but that's another conversation. But the thing is, if you've naturalized 500,000, 1 million, 5 million, we'll use Muslims, then you can't, after you have, a societal breakdown and catastrophic changes in your culture, you can't say, well, let's reverse this process. And that's why I think we need to, one, as you speak, have courage, and we've got to talk about this. I think it needs to be on the national level where we get really uncomfortable and bring in not only the everyday American on X, but also bring it to maybe not a more official level, because in Congress, all they do is they all just chat and then a strongly worded memo will be released or statement, and I'm shocked or whatever. Things have to be done. Here is an article I just happened to read yesterday, and this is something talking about Nihad Awad. Do you know who that is? He's the head of CARE. Nihad Awad.
Of course I know who he is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, this is a really bad dude, to use a technical term. And Nihad came out it was, I don't know how I missed this. It was a sermon or speech at East Plano, Texas, Islamic Center. And what he is telling them there is that if every year, every Muslim, every mosque must sponsor 5 Muslims to enter into higher education in certain fields like journalism, political science, foreign policy, whatever. He had a list. And entertainment industry wants to take over movies too. And he says in the course of 50 years, or no, less, 10 years, we will have 50,000 persons influencing the culture at telling the truth, the real truth about Islam, right? I mean, I've got my Qurans. I know the truth about Islam. I can read the newspaper. I don't even need the Quran. But the thing is, he wants to have 40 or 50 congressmen and women in Congress within 10 years. And
right? So
and I will say this, I do not want Muslim Congress people in America. How's that for politically incorrect? But I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it because it has to be said. Sharia is the law of Islam, and lawmakers in Congress make law, and Sharia is incompatible. How do you have conversations with your buddies that love you, you love them, you play soccer together, whatever? How do you talk about this, and what do they say?
I'll tell you a quick story of an old Muslim buddy that I used to play soccer with. My first year as a doctoral student at Cornell University. So because I'm Lebanese, I connected with another Lebanese guy through another Lebanese friend at Cornell. And that opened me up to a whole bunch of Arab guys that were attending Cornell. And so we used to play soccer. One of them, once upon a time, this is now probably 1990, and actually, this story has become known in the lore of Gad as the Jew story, and it's actually, and you'll see in a second why it's called the Jew story. And I actually wrote it now in Suicidal Empathy. We'll see if it makes it through the cuts when I'm doing the final edits. But anyways, he invites me out for a coffee, to, just to chat. So I'm answering your question about how I speak
believe
to
you're
them.
answering my question. Don't worry.
Yeah. But I'm answering it from 34 years ago. But the same dynamic happens. So we go out for a coffee and we sit down. And the first thing he says is, Gad, you're a very, very smart guy. I said, oh, thank you. He goes, so why haven't you yet, converted to the true faith? I said, oh boy, if this is the purpose of you inviting me for a coffee, it's going to go really badly for you. So then he realizes that that's probably not a good thing. And then he pauses. He goes, Gad, and he looks kind of at the air. He's conflicted. He goes, I really like you. I said, why do you say that with a bit of hesitation and conflict in your voice? Oh, I know why. It's because I'm Jewish. He goes, no, but come on, Gad, you're not a Jew. I said, no, I am a Jew. Now, what he meant was, the reason why I tell that story is because the only way he could reconcile his positive feelings toward me is to remove the marker of me being really a Jew, because I'm a very good soccer player, better than all of them combined. I speak Arabic fluently. It's my mother tongue. So I'm not like a real Jew, like the one that he's been taught to hate straight out of the womb. That's so the only way that I can, Leon Festinger, the famous social psychologist who pioneered the theory of cognitive dissonance, said that it's very, very uncomfortable for people to hold incongruence views in their head, right? Hence cognitive dissonance, right? And so I don't feel good when I've been taught since straight out of the womb that all Jews are devils and they're Satan, to actually have positive feelings for this guy sitting next to me. Therefore, the only way that I can reconcile that is to remove his marker as being a real Jew. So he's not a Jew. So how do I discuss? So usually we stay clear from these conversations. To be honest with you, over the past few years, I've had not as many Muslim friends just because of my social reality is no longer the same as it was in my earlier years. But usually in those cases, it's just we ignore those topics. Although I should mention that one of my recent good friends is an the Imam of Peace. I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
Muhammad Tawhidi. And we actually agree on 99% of things. So this is why I always tell people I really don't judge individuals, because I have more in common with an imam in this case than I might with certain Orthodox Jews, right? So I judge people on their individual merits. Now, in most cases, if you are Muslim, you're likely to internalize some values that I may not be a fan of. But again, judge people as they come.
I agree. You have to judge people as they come. I'm struggling with how to talk about groups, because you don't, if everyone came over as an individual and you could read their minds, right? So I know exactly what they believe. I know what their children, second generation uh, immigrants, often return
Yeah.
to the fundamentals of their faith or their culture, maybe in reaction to their parents becoming assimilated and become the terrorists of the future. You can't see that in advance. And so the only thing I can think of is that we have to start looking at this and have those conversations, but then look at the number, or, you know, the number of immigrants coming from certain areas or certain groups,
Yeah.
because otherwise we're giving up. And by the way, it's cowardly. And so I completely agree with you about individuals, but I have to say, as a group, and I haven't actually called anybody up and said, "You're a Muslim. How would you feel if I said, I think we should limit Muslim immigration to a very small portion of immigration, keep it very tight lid on it, because I don't want to be Somalia. I don't want to be, Pakistan." How do you
Right.
think my friend, whoever that would be, would react?
They're regrettable. I mean, there are some that are fully honest. Some, again, some of the biggest activists that I've seen are either current Muslims or, quote, former Muslims. So, many of them are intellectually honest to appreciate the point that you would be making. But regrettably, uh, the ego defensive strategy
Yeah.
is always easy to invoke, which is, I feel personally attacked. My parents are Muslim and they've never done anything bad to Jews. My uncle is gay and he eats pork and drinks vodka and he's a wonderful Muslim, right? Well, no, he's all those things despite Islam. So the analogy I give, I don't practice a more gentle version of kosher laws that allows me to eat shrimp soup, right? I don't practice, gentle Judaism. I just ignore the part of Judaism that doesn't allow me to eat my favorite Chinese food, right? So there is no militant Islam, there is no fundamentalist Islam, there is no political Islam, there is no Islamism, there is no extremist Islam. There's just Islam.
Uh,
Islam is a codified set of ideas that are mainly in the Quran, in the Hadith, the sayings and the deeds of Muhammad, and in the Sirah, in the biography of Muhammad. Then you've got Sharia law, which is the codified Islamic law. There are 4 schools of Sharia law where we can debate different things. That's kind of the cursus of what Islam is. Does Islam say love, 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 or does it say kill, kill, kill? Well, actually, it says both, but it's a trick. And here is where maybe your viewing audience should particularly pay attention, although I hope they're paying attention throughout the whole conversation. Whenever there is a contradictory statement, for example, in the Quran, let's say your friends from CARE will often say there is no compulsion in religion in Islam. Look, here's the quote. Okay, now that quote comes from the Meccan period. The Quran has 2 periods. There's the Meccan period and there's the Medinan period. The Meccan period is where Muhammad did his early proselytizing, and for many, many years, he was only able to attract about 150 adherents, despite many, many years of proselytizing. That message was a very peaceful one. Then he went to Medina and he changed his message. The message became a lot more violent, supremacist, conquering, intolerant. And then the number of adherents exploded. So now there's a theological problem. How could the same holy book, the Word of God, have both? There's no compulsion in religion, and there's only one religion, Islam, right? How do we reconcile peace with kill, kill, kill? Well, it's through a mechanism called abrogation. Abrogation is wherever you have two contradictory statements, A and not A, the later statement abrogates the earlier statement. If God chooses to change his mind, he chooses his mind. He changes his mind. That's it. It is what it is. And so through the process of abrogation, you'll nullify the earlier verses. So whenever the Muslim apologists give you some sweet kind of kumbaya thing, they are actually quoting an abrogated verse, right? And so
that's right. I always wondered had they read it because, and I think that since the internet and since the translation of the Hadith, the Sirah, and the Quran, in English online, very readily available, that people do know, or everybody should know about abrogation by now. Everybody should know Surah 929 and all the rest of it. It's nuts that they don't. Muhammad is the model and the standard by which all Muslims are to adhere. And I don't know how you get around that, because that is it. And we know, at least you and I would come to the conclusion that that is not an ethic that we want imported into our country. And in other countries, and if somebody calls me an Islamophobe, I just think, are you kidding me? You're really going to use that on an American in 2024? Or 2025? That's nuts. Nobody cares that you think, it's not like we're in England with Keir Starmer and their insanity there. But I wanted to ask you this. Side note, I'm redefining Islamophobia because I think it's a fake word. But I think it should be redefined as the irrational fear of criticizing Islam. That Islamophobia, because what we have is an entire continent over in England, or forget Poland, they're doing just fine. So there are some,
Hungary.
And Hungary, exactly. So, and Poland, I'm sure you know this. Poland is the one. I can't remember the name of. I can't pronounce his name. That came to the rescue at the gates of Vienna and saved all Europe.
Oh, yes.
From being taken over by the Muslims. If it were not for Poland, all of Europe and America would probably be Islamic today. So what do you think about that? Islamophobia is irrational or rational fear of criticizing Islam?
Well, that's part and parcel of the malady of suicidal empathy, right? I have a whole section in the forthcoming book where I talk about the reflex to never, ever, ever say anything negative about Islam. And so I certainly discuss that in Suicidal Empathy, but I discuss it also in great detail in the Parasitic Mind, both in chapters 6 and 7. So in chapter 6, where I talk about ostrich parasitic syndrome, right?
That's
and
good.
So there, right? And so there, what I do as a demonstration of what OPS looks like, ostrich parasitic syndrome, is I discuss the number of Islamic terror attacks since 9/11 alone. Now, they've grown a lot since I wrote Parasitic Mind. The current number is at around 47,000 terror attacks since 9/11 alone in nearly 70 countries. Now, 47,000. If you took every single other religion, put them together, it wouldn't amount to 0.01% of the number of terror attacks that have been committed by Islamic terrorists. And when Islamic terrorists commit the acts that they do, they don't hide the motives for why they do it. They'll usually tell you exactly which Quranic edict they're using to justify this attack or that attack. Now, why am I saying in the context of ostrich parasitic syndrome? If you then see what Westerners, Western writers, Western professors, Western journalists, the excuses that they come up with to explain the real cause, it defeats even my satire, even the brilliant.
Give some examples. Give some examples. Just so.
Here's one. You ready?
Yes.
The terrorists out of Belgium did what they did because of lack of art exposure. I mean, who amongst us didn't, as a result of not seeing enough Modigliani, Picasso, and Chagall, decide not to join ISIS to throw gays off rooftops. It's a straight line between not enough Picasso and becoming an ISIS member. So that's one. So lack of art exposure. You ready for number two? I'm going to give you two or three. Number two, this is the science guy, the very, very bright Bill Nye.
The guy with the bow tie?
The guy with the bow tie, the science guy, who recently explained to all of us that biological sex is really on a spectrum, which is really, it's both news to me and it's news to Charles Darwin. But
Tyson DeGrasse, I can
I've gone after him a million times.
That was so bad. We won't go there, but I mean, when he did that was it.
You should watch. Have you watched my clip where I rebut him?
I think I probably have. I'm quite sure I did last week.
There's a clip. So I'm going to go back to the OPS in a second. But as a parenthesis tangent, I went after Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he says that, look, really your gender identity and your sex is really what you wear, how you present yourself to the world. So I did a clip where I start off looking the way that I do now, and then I start putting on a wig and then half of lipstick. And then you see me transition 30% women, 60% women, and then so on. And that's why satire is so powerful.
I gotta tell you, you need to just stick with your nice classic silver. You look just like my husband, by the way.
Except much better looking.
I told my husband, do you know every man in the world that hits 50 or so, silver hair with a silver beard, you all look the same. So,
well, all right. So let me finish
the OPS. Go back to OPC. Yes.
OPS. So number two, Bill Nye said that the attack in Bataclan in Paris, where I think about 200 people were mowed down like little mosquitoes, well, that is completely conceivable that it was due to climate change. And then he gave the causal mechanisms by which, so Muhammad, Ahmad, and Mahmoud, when they went up and screamed, Allahu Akbar, killed the kafir, it was because of CO2 emissions and lack of solar panels.
These are serious examples, by the way. They are literally not doing this as a stand-up routine. They are proposing it.
Number three, beard bullying. Beard bullying. That's the San Bernardino guy with his wife who killed a whole bunch of people.
In their office?
Because there was beard bullying in the office. That's why, by the way, I keep my beard really beautifully trimmed, because if I let it grow longer and then someone beard bullies me, then it's an easy step to then me becoming an ISIS terrorist.
Well, of
course.
That's why I had my husband's was getting really nice and long, and I just said, you know what, you got to stop, because I see the terrorist in you coming out. You're scared.
So all this to say that, to your point, every possible departure from reason, or to use the cool kids' language of gaslighting, everything is off. Is okay, as long as the ultimate goal is to protect the noble virtue of Islam. And so you're exactly right that it's a deep malady, and it's one that we need to wake up from. And again, some idiots will write to me saying, oh, you're so full of hate. I am the furthest thing from being someone full of hate. I'm an affable, loving, romantic, sentimental guy. But yes, I do think that there are many problems with Islam, and I want my children and yours and their children to grow up in a free world, free of Islamic intrusions. If that makes me hateful to some people, so be it.
Hey, look, I didn't even know there was such a thing as anti-Semitism until I was an adult. That's the way I grew up. I mean, it just never occurred to me. I didn't even know what it was, and I didn't really know about Islam until 2000, which is crazy. I really did not know anything about it till 2000, and we have all got to wake up. And it's these conversations where I think that a lot of times barriers are broken down to conversation by just jumping in and saying it, and not covering it up with a bunch of pretty little things, And I think that J.D. Vance, I keep looking over at J.D., did a really good job at it. And he's just pitch perfect or masterclass at this. We've got to break the Demi syndrome. I think
Yes.
that there's like this Stockholm syndrome, but it's a Demi syndrome, and there's a psychological. I've read about some Muslim Brotherhood great thinkers that said, we're going to take the West, we're going to do it demographically by immigration, invasion, whatever. We're going to do, this is nothing violent here. We're just going to immigrate. Then we're going to have our women reproduce like rabbits.
Yeah, it's a 3-step, if I may say it.
Go ahead. Give me the third step.
Yeah. So number one, it's through the womb of our women, right? Number two, it's through hijrah, immigration. And
yeah.
number three, it's by using your miserable freedoms against you. That's exactly what the care guy that you said, that's exactly the playbook. Literally, they're standing on top of the mountain, they're screaming at you what they're going to do. And then you keep going, la, 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 I don't want to hear it because my friend Ahmad is gay and he eats pork and he's lovely and he doesn't want to cause any harm. By the way, I should mention one thing. Earlier, you were saying, how could you engage with, these difficult conversations with Muslims and so on? Earlier, you said, oh, you're not a practicing Jew. So let me slightly correct that. People often say that I'm an atheist. I don't like that term because I'm about as Jewish as can be, because I've lived my Judaism in ways that 99.9% of Jews have never lived, which is I was going to be executed for being Jewish, right?
There you
I
go.
come from the East, right? So my Jewish identity is very anchored as part of my personhood. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that when Shabbat comes, I'm uniquely careful to only light the candle at 5:21 because Rabbi so-and-so said, but 5:22 would really send me down a down sinful slope, right? So it's in that sense that I'm not practicing. By the same token, there are many people...
Because we keep Shabbat. We keep Shabbat. Right? Yeah.
But, so what I'm saying is that religion... You go ahead.
When I said you're not practicing, well, firstly, that's because that's everywhere. Like, obviously I've known you for I didn't just meet you in your most recent book. I've known you for quite some time and who you are and love you. I mean, just I thought when I first saw you that maybe you used to be a comedian or something because you're so funny. Sorry. But Jewishness, it's an ethnicity. And a lot of people do not get this, that there is, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel, and Yehuda or Yehud and Judah. I'm just going to go by my Bible. Judah was one of the tribes, one of the sons of Israel, Yaakov, Israel. And so I won't go into all that history. You know it. But the point is that you might have said Israelites, and then everybody would understand, well, Israelites are a culture, they're an ethnicity, etc., the children of Israel, the children of Yaakov. But when they think of Judaism, because of the way that word came from, I guess, the Greek into, I'm not the Greek, well, into the French language, I think. That's where it got the D. So it's Jew. That's where it dropped the D. And so you have Jewish and Jewish. And so people think of this as a religion. It's not a people. And they don't realize that it's Israel that God has made all these promises to in the Torah and the prophets. It's Israel and Judah. There's this whole cognitive dissonance about this. And so when I said you were practicing, are you an atheist or kind of, but you're culturally Jewish?
Look, do I think that I have a direct window to speak to God? No.
Okay.
Does that make me an atheist? I don't know. I'll let you decide that. Am I about as Jewish as you can be? Yes. because Judaism is a multifaceted concept. The reason why I brought that up is because I think there are many, many things in Islamic history that one could hang on to and present themselves to the world as coming from that tradition and be proud of. There's Islamic poetry and there's Islamic literature. And there was a time when there was great Islamic scientific innovations. I mean, it wasn't due to Islam, but it came from those societies. There is, Islamic philosophy. There are cultural values in the Middle East of hospitality, of warmth, of letting in the strangers that are beautiful. So there are many, many qualities and attributes, cultural attributes, architectural attributes, scientific, philosophical, that are beautiful and that you can hang on to without necessarily thinking that you need to conquer the world under the one unifying flag of Allah, right?
Caliphate.
Right. So I can be Jewish without thinking that, women should shave their head and wear the wig and so on, right? Does that make me an atheist? No.
No, there's tradition there, but see, with Islam, okay, that is tradition. It's rabbinic tradition. It goes back. The kippah is not in the scriptures. We know that, right? So there's tradition. Judaism, modern or post first century Judaism, has more rules than people can memorize. We know that. But in Islam, the fundamentals of truth, all the violence, all of that is here. Now, the five pillars aren't really here. In five pillars, it's not 5 prayers a day in here, but fight the disbelievers until that do not believe in what Allah prohibits, and that do not believe in Muhammad, and that do not believe in their last days. Then fight them until they give up, till they pay the jizya as a subservient class, not a second-class citizen, as a totally subservient subjugate, right?
But you're right. But even if people didn't, even if they were Muslim and they didn't know all those injunctions, there is still a reflex in Islam that says that you should but it isn't what you said, which is Islam is a proselytizing religion. I mean, Christianity was as well, but Islam has taken it to a whole...
But Christianity entered into... I just interrupted you. Oh, well. Pretend we're around the family Shabbat table and we're all yelling at each other. Christianity, and we don't even have time to go into all the warts of the second, third, fourth, well, whatever, of Christianity's sins. But what I'm saying is that Christianity didn't create an empire. Christians were subjugated, just like Jews, by the empire of Rome, and then Romans became Christians, right? But empire and colonization and supremacy did not come out of my scriptures. It doesn't come out of the Torah and the prophets. It does not come out of that. And the Gospels. But it does here. Islamic supremacy is hard baked into every chapter of this book.
So let me add to what you just said. Look, if you're playing a soccer match and you say, what is the ultimate goal of the game for each team? It's to score more goals than the other team. If you do that, you win the game. And the same rule applies in basketball, and the same rule applies in football and so on. So we could get a sense of what is the driving singular goal of each religion. We can distill it to one single goal. In Islam, the world will be at peace when the entire globe is under Allah's dominion.
That's right.
It is under the right? So it is a deeply violent, supremacist, intolerant ideology because it needs to ensure that the one true noble faith reigns. Now, let's take Judaism. In Judaism, it is literally illegal in the doctrines to proselytize, right? You're not supposed to convert someone. As a matter of fact, when someone seeks a conversion into Judaism, you're meant to put up as many obstacles as possible and dissuade them as a test of their spiritual purity. On the other hand, in Islam, you just say the Shahada publicly, and voila, you've become Muslim. So if you're sitting on the bench and you're looking at all these different religions, which one do you think poses you greater existential threat? The one that is uniquely concerned about you to make sure that you become like the rest of us Muslim, or the one with only 15 million people who just want to go about their business, right? I mean, I always tell people, if you put it in, say, the language of marketing and getting market, getting market penetration, Islam is a highly successful marketing campaign because it has found a way to make sure that almost 1/4 of humanity in only 1400 years is now Muslim. Jews suck at this marketing game. Right? They are much older than
Total
all
failure.
of the other religions
You're
combined.
bad at genociding. You're bad at
We're bad.
colonial
We suck.
settler.
We're good at winning Nobel Prizes, by the way. We're
That's
very
it.
good at that. Okay. So 15 million people. Muslims outnumber Jews 125 to 1. So if you're sitting on the bench somewhere and just looking at this, who should you be more concerned about? The ones who it's literally baked into their religion that they don't want to have anything to do with you. I mean, to the point where people say that Jews are arrogant in their insular nature, right? So if we don't commit genocide, we're assholes, and supposedly we also commit. So we're all roads lead to
And the crazy thing about that, Gad, is this: I know my scriptures. God, by the way, is the ultimate Zionist. He invented Zionism. It didn't happen in 1840s, 1887, whatever anybody thinks from. Okay, the humans that put a label to it called Zionism, but God is the founder of Zionism, and he will bring about the full ingathering of the Jewish people, of all Israel, and Judah will be brought back to Zion, his beloved Zion, and where he will dwell forever. Sorry, that was not really a sermon, but it almost sounded like one. But the point is that there is an ultimate goal to the Bible. It will not be brought on, this is a big difference, by human efforts. I was so impressed that you got this, because Pierce Morgan is an idiot. Sorry, Pierce, I'm sure you won't see this. But when he goes on to say, well, there's violence in the Torah and in the Bible, and I'm thinking, okay, we can go there, but no one has time to answer that. But when he says there's this kind of Christianity that believes that we have to bring the Jews back so that we can usher into the apocalypse, usher into Armageddon, which is a valley in Israel, Megiddo, usher that in. And so then a bunch of the Jews are going to get killed and Messiah comes back. That there is no theology that says that. We base, Christians base their Zionism on the scriptures, and it's based on the biblical promises of God to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel. And by the way, Yeshua, Jesus, said, I was sent for no other than the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And at the end of the scriptures, before he goes to the cross, he said that all the nations will be gathered together at the end, and they will be judged by how they treated his brethren, and that is the Jews and the Israelites. It was called the land of Israel, by the way, in the Gospels and the prophets, not Palestine. So my point is, Zionism is everywhere there. Now, Islam completely smashes that, completely smashes it. And there has to be, we have to be thinking about immigration, talking about it like you and I have just been talking about it, and supporting. By the way, he never mentioned Islam.
Who's he?
J.D. Vance.
Oh, right. No, I noticed that.
He never said the word, and I thought that was very, very, very interesting. But we have to say the words much, much more. There is somebody I wanted to ask you about. I know you would have an opinion about him, but he's another guy who's silver-haired with a beard, and he's from the Middle East, and he's a comedian, Bassem Youssef,
Oh,
who drives me mad. He knows nothing about history of the Middle East.
he's to use a Yiddish term, although I'm Lebanese Jewish, not Ashkenazi Jewish. He is the ultimate consummate schmuck. By the way, I appeared on a show maybe a year ago where the woman started the show, and she's like, "Oh, I was amazed. I saw you on Pierce Morgan, and it went viral." And as she kept talking, I realized that she thought I was Bassem Youssef. And so I tried to, as gently as possible, because it's on the show. I don't know if she edited it out or whether it was live streamed or whatever, to try to kind of correct her. So yes, apparently we look alike. I'd like to think I'm much better looking and much funnier.
You are
and
so
much smarter than you.
so much. He's Egyptian. He's very, very arrogant. He's very smart in the sense that I think was a surgeon before he became a comedian, which I thought was a interesting career path.
Yeah.
But anyway, would you ever do a debate with him and slaughter him with your...
I tell you what, yes. So I'm very careful to choose with whom I interact.
Yeah.
Not because I'm afraid to debate Bassem or whomever. It's because a really fruitful debate has to be one where both interlocutors have the intellectual humility to at least be willing to change their position in light of incoming evidence. If it is the case that I know a priori that there is nothing